Teen arrested in connection to school threat investigation. Before we dive into tonight's case, understand this: what you're about to hear isn't just another headline. It's a story that unfolded in real time, in hallways filled with lockers and laughter, and it nearly shattered an entire community. If you're drawn to the darkest corners of real investigations, if you want the full truth behind the flashing lights and whispered rumors, make sure you're subscribed, because stories like this don't end the way you expect. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the final second. Chapter 1. The Message That Froze a Town. The first patrol car screeched into the school parking lot just after 7:42 a.m. Students had barely stepped off their buses when the lockdown alarm pierced the air, sharp, metallic, and unmistakable. Teachers who were sipping their morning coffee dropped their mugs mid-sentence. Doors slammed, locks clicked, lights flicked off. Within seconds, the entire building was swallowed by a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. Outside, red and blue lights painted the brick walls in frantic color. Officers moved fast, hands hovering near their holsters, eyes scanning windows for movement. The early autumn air was cold enough to sting, but sweat gathered beneath bulletproof vests as word spread over police radios. There's a credible threat. Suspect may be armed. Repeat, may be armed. Inside the main office, Principal Laura Bennett's hands trembled as she replayed the message for the fourth time. It had arrived through an anonymous social media account at 6:58 a.m., just before sunrise. Today's the day. You'll all remember my name. Attached was a blurry photo of what appeared to be the school's north entrance. And beneath it, a time, 8:15 a.m. No one knew who sent it. No one knew if it was a sick joke or something far worse. Detective Marcus Hale arrived at 7:55 a.m., his expression carved from years of homicide scenes and domestic disputes. He wasn't easily rattled. But schools were different. Schools meant children. Chaos. Panic. One wrong move, and the consequences would echo for generations. He stepped into the command center forming near the gymnasium entrance. Officers were already reviewing security camera feeds. Parents were flooding the school's phone lines. Social media was exploding. "Talk to me," Hale said. Officer Ramirez handed him a tablet displaying the threatening post. Account was created last night. No profile photo. No followers. We're working with the platform to trace it. Any signs of forced entry? Nothing yet. But we can't confirm if someone's already inside. The clock ticked toward 8:15. Inside room 214, English teacher Daniel Harper whispered reassurances to his students, who huddled against the wall beneath covered windows. Some were crying. Others stared blankly at their phones, refreshing feeds filled with speculation. One name kept appearing in group chats. Ethan Cole. 17 years old. Junior. Quiet. Kept to himself. A kid who wore hoodies even in summer and avoided eye contact in the hallways. At 8:07 a.m., a student texted the school resource officer, "I think it's Ethan. He posted weird stuff last night." By 8:10, 3 more messages echoed the same suspicion. Detective Hale felt the pressure tightening like a vice. He pulled Ethan's school file. No criminal record. Decent grades. A minor disciplinary note for a hallway scuffle freshman year. Nothing violent. Nothing alarming. But then a counselor quietly added something else. "He's been isolated lately," she said. "There were reports of bullying. We were monitoring it." Hale's jaw tightened. Motive didn't equal action, but it couldn't be ignored. At 8:14 a.m., officers located Ethan's locker. It sat halfway down the sophomore corridor, painted dull gray like all the others. Students had scratched initials into its surface. Someone had drawn a faded smiley face in permanent marker. The hallway was empty now, but the air felt electric. "Open it," Hale ordered. A bolt cutter snapped through the lock with a sharp metallic crack. The locker door creaked open. Inside, textbooks, a crumpled hoodie, a half-empty energy drink, and a folded sheet of paper tucked between binders. Officer Ramirez pulled it out carefully. It was a printed map of the school. Certain areas were circled in red ink. The cafeteria, the auditorium, the north entrance. And scrawled across the bottom in jagged handwriting were 3 words. They'll see me. The command center fell silent. Find him, Hale said. Ethan hadn't shown up to his first class. His bus driver confirmed he boarded that morning. Security footage showed him entering the building at 7:28 a.m. He wore a black hoodie, head down, backpack slung over one shoulder. But at 7:31 a.m., the cameras near the science wing glitched for exactly 90 seconds. When they came back online, Ethan was gone. The timing was too precise to ignore. Officers began a systematic sweep of the building. Classroom by classroom. Storage closets. Bathrooms. The boiler room. Every footstep echoed like a countdown. Meanwhile, outside, news vans gathered. Helicopters circled overhead. Parents cried behind police tape, desperate for information. At 8:22 a.m., long past the time mentioned in the message, nothing had happened. No gunshots. No explosion. No visible attacker. Relief began creeping in, but it was fragile, uncertain. Then Officer Daniel's voice crackled over the radio. Detective Hale, we've got something. The voice wasn't steady. Hale moved quickly toward the science wing. A small crowd of officers stood outside the chemistry lab storage room. The door was locked from the inside. We heard movement, Daniel said. Then it stopped. Hale knocked firmly. Ethan? It's Detective Hale. If you're in there, we need to talk. No answer. He tried again. This doesn't have to get worse than it already is. Silence. The maintenance supervisor was called to unlock the door. The metal key scraped against the lock, each second stretching unbearably long. When the door finally swung open, officers rushed in, weapons raised. The room was empty, but on the floor, near a stack of lab equipment, sat Ethan's backpack. Hale crouched beside it. Carefully, slowly he unzipped it. Inside were notebooks, a laptop, a portable phone charger, and something that made the air in the room feel 10 degrees colder. A second phone, burner style, prepaid, still powered on. On its screen was the same threatening message sent earlier that morning. But this time, the account wasn't anonymous. It was logged in. The username read, Justice for Ethan. Hale's mind raced. Was this a staged frame-up? Or had Ethan orchestrated the threat himself? Forensics quickly checked the device. The last activity timestamp, 7:02 a.m., 4 minutes after the original message had been posted. Where is he? Hale muttered. Then another call came over the radio. We've located Ethan. He wasn't hiding in the building. He was sitting on a curb 3 blocks away, just outside a convenience store, hoodie pulled tight around his face. A patrol unit had spotted him walking alone, hands shoved into his pockets. He didn't run. He didn't resist. When officers approached, he simply looked up and said, "Is everyone okay?" They placed him in handcuffs at 8:47 a.m. As he was guided into the back of the patrol car, reporters shouted questions. Did you make the threat? Were you planning an attack? Why did you do it? Ethan said nothing. Back at the school, lockdown was lifted by 10:15 a.m. Students were dismissed early. Parents held their children tighter than usual. Rumors spread faster than facts. Detective Hale sat across from Ethan in an interrogation room that afternoon. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. You want to tell me about the message? Hale asked calmly. Ethan stared at the table. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he finally whispered. Hale leaned forward. Go how far? Ethan's eyes flickered upward, filled with something that didn't look like anger. It looked like fear. Before he could answer, an officer knocked urgently and stepped inside. Detective, you need to see this. Hale followed him to the digital forensics lab. They had traced the IP address used to create the threatening account. It didn't come from Ethan's home. It didn't come from the school. It came from inside the house of someone else entirely. Someone much closer to the investigation than anyone had expected. And when Hale saw the name on the screen, his stomach dropped. Because if the trace was accurate, then Ethan Cole wasn't the only one involved. And the person connected to that IP address had been standing inside the command center all morning, watching everything unfold. The IP address. The name on the screen didn't belong to a stranger. It belonged to Officer Daniel Ramirez. The same Ramirez who had handed Detective Marcus Hale the tablet that morning. The same Ramirez who had stood beside him when they cut open Ethan's locker. The same Ramirez who had said, "Find him," with urgency that now felt different. For a moment, Hale said nothing. Digital forensics technician Avery Collins turned her monitor slightly so only Hale could see it clearly. "We triple-checked the trace. The account creation and the original threat message were routed through a residential Wi-Fi network registered to Daniel Ramirez. Timestamp matches 6:52 a.m. account created. 6:58 a.m. message sent." Hale's voice lowered. "Could someone spoof it?" "Possible," Avery replied. "But unlikely without skill. And there's more." She clicked into another window. At 7:01 a.m., that same IP address logged into the burner phone account, Justice for Ethan, from a secondary device. The session lasted 43 seconds. Hale's jaw tightened. "You're telling me someone in Ramirez's house created the threat, then logged into the same account again minutes later?" "Yes. And Ramirez was on duty by 7:30. According to dispatch logs, he clocked in at 7:18 a.m. The timeline began to form like a storm cloud. Hale stared at the screen, heart thudding in slow, deliberate beats. He had worked with Ramirez for 6 years. They had stood over homicide victims together, shared late-night coffee in patrol cars, trusted each other's instincts without hesitation. Now that trust felt fragile. "Who else lives at the address?" Hale asked. "Wife," Avery said, "and a 16-year-old son. Lucas Ramirez." The air shifted. Hale remembered Lucas vaguely. Quiet kid, sometimes came to department family events. Dark hair, withdrawn posture. A year younger than Ethan Cole. Same school. The coincidence was too sharp to ignore. "Keep this quiet," Hale said. "No one else needs to know yet." But secrets inside a police department rarely stayed buried. By early afternoon, Hale had requested Ramirez step into a private conference room. Ramirez entered casually at first, still wearing his uniform, coffee in hand. "What's up? We get more from the kid." Hale closed the door slowly. "We traced the IP." Ramirez's expression didn't change. "Okay. It leads to your house." The words hung in the air like smoke. For a fraction of a second, barely visible, Ramirez's grip tightened around his coffee cup. "That's not possible," he said evenly. "My wife was home this morning. She works nights. My son left for school at 6:30. The threat was posted at 6:58. Ramirez's eyes narrowed slightly. "You think my family had something to do with this?" "I think I need answers." Silence stretched between them. Ramirez set the coffee down carefully. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Marcus. Then help me understand." Ramirez ran a hand over his face. "My Wi-Fi password hasn't changed in years. Anyone could have hacked it." "We'll verify that," Hale replied. "But until we do, you're going to need to step back from this case." That landed harder than anything else. "You're suspending me?" Ramirez asked. "I'm reassigning you temporarily." Ramirez's voice hardened. "You really think I'd risk my badge? My career? For what? A stupid school prank?" Hale didn't answer, because deep down he wasn't sure what he believed. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in juvenile holding, his earlier words echoing in Hale's mind. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." When Hale returned to the interrogation room that evening, Ethan looked smaller somehow. The bravado people expected from a threat suspect wasn't there. Just exhaustion. "We traced the account," Hale said calmly. Ethan swallowed. "Okay. It didn't come from your house." Ethan blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "It came from Officer Ramirez's address." For the first time since his arrest, Ethan's composure cracked. "What?" he whispered. "You know his son, Lucas?" Ethan hesitated. "We have math together." "Friends?" A long pause. "Not really." "Enemies?" Ethan's fingers curled slightly against the table. "He talks." "Talks how?" "Online. Mostly." Hale leaned forward. "About you?" Ethan's silence answered the question. It started to unravel slowly. Screenshots were retrieved from Ethan's laptop, group chats filled with sarcasm, memes, and subtle cruelty. Lucas Ramirez's username appeared repeatedly. The messages weren't explicit threats, but they painted a picture of isolation. Future school shooter vibes. Careful, he might snap. Someone check his backpack. The irony was chilling. You ever respond? Hale asked. At first, Ethan said quietly. Then I just stopped. Why? Because it didn't matter. Hale studied him carefully. Did you create the account just for Ethan? Ethan shook his head. No. Did you write the map? Ethan hesitated. Yes, he admitted finally. Why? I was angry, Ethan said, voice trembling. I wanted them to be scared for once. Who? All of them. The room felt heavier. You weren't planning to hurt anyone? Hale pressed. No, Ethan said quickly. I swear. I wanted attention. I wanted it to stop. The pieces didn't quite fit. If Ethan created the map and left it in his locker, someone had to know about it. And the burner phone, planted in the storage room, suggested planning beyond a spontaneous act of anger. Did you tell anyone about the map? Hale asked. Ethan's eyes flickered. I showed Lucas, he admitted. Hale's pulse spiked. When? Last night. Over video chat. And what did he say? Ethan hesitated again. He laughed. That night, a search warrant was executed at the Ramirez residence. Lucas answered the door. He looked surprised, but not shocked. His room was neat. Too neat. Posters of video games lined the walls. A gaming console glowed faintly beneath the television. On his desk sat a laptop. Digital forensics began imaging the hard drive immediately. Within an hour, they found it. A folder hidden 3 layers deep. Inside were drafts of the threatening message. Earlier versions. Edited timestamps. Variations of the phrase, "You'll all remember my name." And one more detail. A screenshot of Ethan's map. Taken during a video call. Hale felt the case twisting in a direction no one had predicted. Lucas had the technical knowledge. The access. The motive to escalate the situation beyond online teasing. When Lucas was brought in for questioning, he maintained composure far beyond his years. I didn't mean for it to blow up like this, he said calmly. The same phrase Ethan had used. Blow up how? Hale asked. I thought it would just get him suspended. Maybe scare him. So you created the account? Lucas hesitated just long enough. I was proving a point. What point? That people should take threats seriously. Hale stared at him. You framed a classmate to prove a point? Lucas's expression hardened. He was already acting weird. I just pushed it. Outside the interrogation room, Ramirez stood watching through the glass, face pale. His son. His house. His IP address. Everything he had built suddenly felt unstable. But the worst part came moments later. Forensics interrupted again. Detective, Avery said urgently. We just found something else. She turned the monitor toward him. Another scheduled post. Set to publish at 3 p.m. the following day. A new threat. More specific. More graphic. Naming a location inside the school library. Hale's blood ran cold. Lucas hadn't just escalated the situation. He had planned a second wave. And based on the metadata, it had been scheduled from a device that wasn't in Lucas's bedroom. It had been scheduled remotely. From inside the police department network. Hale felt the ground shift beneath him. Because that meant one thing. This wasn't just a teenage rivalry spiraling out of control. Someone else, someone with access to law enforcement systems, had logged into that account. And if that was true, then the real architect of the chaos hadn't been a bullied teen. Or a reckless classmate. It was someone wearing a badge. The badge behind the screen. The police department went unnaturally quiet after midnight. Fluorescent lights hummed above nearly empty desks. Computer monitors glowed in rows, casting pale reflections across polished floors. The chaos of the morning, sirens, shouting parents, helicopters, felt like a distant storm that had already passed. But Detective Marcus Hale knew it hadn't passed at all. It had just changed shape. On the screen in front of him was the metadata from the second scheduled threat. The digital fingerprint was unmistakable. The post had been drafted at 4:12 p.m., hours after Ethan's arrest, using internal department Wi-Fi. Not public Wi-Fi. Not a spoofed address. The police department's secured network. Someone inside the building had logged into the same account, Justice for Ethan, and scheduled a new threat targeting the school library for the following afternoon. If it had gone live, the panic would have been worse than before. The public would have believed Ethan had accomplices. That the first lockdown was only a rehearsal. And trust, already fragile, would have shattered completely. Hale stood slowly, eyes scanning the bullpen beyond the glass walls of his office. A handful of officers remained on late shift. Dispatchers answered calls in hushed tones. No one looked suspicious. No one ever did. He turned to Avery. Access logs. Every terminal that connected to that account. Already pulling them, she said. The list populated on the screen. 5 terminals had been active in the window when the draft was created. 3 belonged to administrative staff, both currently on leave, alibis confirmed. 1 was a patrol workstation near the briefing room. Hale's breath slowed. The last terminal was inside the command center room they had used that morning. The room where officers had reviewed security footage. Where updates were given. Where rumors spread like wildfire. The room where nearly everyone on the case had stepped in and out at some point. It meant access wasn't limited to a single suspect. It meant opportunity. Pull camera footage from inside the department, Hale ordered. They reviewed hours of silent video. Officers entering and exiting. Phones ringing. Coffee refills. Routine. Then, at 4:09 p.m., the command center door opened. Officer Daniel Ramirez stepped inside alone. He approached the terminal, sat down, and stayed there for exactly 4 minutes. At 4:13 p.m., he stood up and left. The draft was created at 4:12. No one else entered during that window. The evidence didn't just point toward Ramirez. It cornered him. Hale felt something fracture inside his chest. Loyalty, history, trust, all cracking under the weight of pixels and timestamps. Bring him in, Hale said quietly. Ramirez didn't resist when Hale asked him to sit down in interrogation. But this time, the dynamic had shifted. No uniform. No badge on display. Just 2 men separated by a steel table. You accessed the command center terminal at 4:09 p.m., Hale began. Ramirez nodded slowly. I needed to check updates. You logged into Justice for Ethan. Ramirez's jaw tightened. That's not possible. We have video. Silence. Hale leaned forward. You were trying to control the fallout. Ramirez's eyes flickered. For your son. That landed. Ramirez exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging. I was trying to protect him, he said at last. By escalating the threat? No, Ramirez snapped. By making sure Ethan looked like the sole actor. If a second post went up, they'd think he had some twisted plan. They'd stop digging into Lucas. Hale stared at him in disbelief. You were willing to risk another lockdown? More fear? More trauma? Ramirez's voice broke for the first time. You don't understand what it's like watching your kid get dragged into something like this. I understand exactly what it's like, Hale said evenly. I just chose the law over blood. Ramirez looked away. He had seen the IP trace that morning. He had known, before Hale even confronted him, that the account led back to his house. He had realized Lucas wasn't just teasing Ethan online. He had realized his son had crossed a line that could destroy their family. So he did what desperate people sometimes do. He made it worse. By creating a second threat from inside the department, he believed investigators would assume Ethan had accomplices within the school. The case would expand outward, scattering focus. Lucas's involvement would blur. But digital evidence doesn't blur. It sharpens. And the burner phone? Hale asked. Ramirez shook his head. That wasn't me. That part at least seemed true. Forensics later confirmed the burner device had been planted by Lucas early that morning before classes began, during the 90-second camera glitch near the science wing. A glitch Lucas had created by briefly accessing the school's unsecured maintenance panel weeks earlier, just in case he ever needed it. He had engineered confusion. His father had engineered obstruction. And Ethan, the isolated, angry teen, had been caught in the middle, guilty only of wanting attention in a world that mocked him for existing. By sunrise, both Ramirez and Lucas were formally charged, Lucas with making terroristic threats and cyber harassment, Ramirez with obstruction of justice and misuse of departmental resources. The news cycle erupted. Headlines shifted from "teen arrested in school threat" to something far more explosive. Officer implicated in school threat cover-up. Parents who had cried outside police tape now demanded accountability from the department itself. At the school, grief counselors replaced substitute teachers. Students walked hallways still echoing with anxiety. Ethan returned home under supervision. The charges against him reduced after prosecutors determined he had not authored the online threats. He still faced consequences for the map and for fueling panic, but the narrative had changed. He wasn't the mastermind. He was a spark in a room already filled with gasoline. Weeks later, Hale visited the now quiet campus as part of a safety review. Lockers stood open between classes. Conversations were softer than before. Security cameras had been upgraded. Wi-Fi protection strengthened. But no upgrade could erase what had happened. Hale paused near the north entrance, the one circled in red ink on Ethan's map. He thought about how close the community had come to something irreversible. Not because of a weapon, but because of ego, fear, and the desperate need to control a story. In the end, the real danger hadn't been a violent plan. It had been manipulation. A teenager seeking validation. Another seeking superiority. And a father who believed he could outsmart the truth. As Ramirez was escorted into court months later, he avoided Hale's eyes. Lucas stood beside his attorney, expression unreadable. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. Trust in institutions is fragile. When those sworn to protect attempt to distort truth, the damage multiplies. Outside, cameras flashed. But inside the community, something more lasting remained, a lingering doubt. If this could happen here, where else could it happen? The case officially closed 3 months later. Yet on the final page of the internal report, one detail quietly unsettled Hale. The original anonymous account, Justice for Ethan, had been accessed one final time. Not to post. Not to schedule. Just to log in. The timestamp? 2 days after Ramirez had surrendered his badge. And the login didn't come from the Ramirez home. Or the department. It came from a public library computer across town. The session lasted exactly 30 seconds. Long enough to view the account dashboard. Long enough to confirm something. Then it logged out. Forensics never identified who accessed it. No new threats followed. No additional messages appeared. But the question lingered like a shadow stretching across the case file. Had someone else been watching from the beginning? Had Lucas truly acted alone at first? Or had the chaos inspired someone new? Hale closed the file knowing one thing for certain. Threats don't always come from the faces we expect. Sometimes they come from silence. From screens. From the people standing right beside us. And sometimes, the most dangerous part of a crime is the lie told afterward. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Because the next case begins with a 911 call that was never supposed to be heard, and what investigators found behind that locked apartment door will stay with you long after the screen goes dark.